and if we get stuck into things, and then I'll let people in as they come in, if that's all right. So I'm delighted to have Siobhan and Damien today with us for our Lunch and Learn. Today's topic is on working towards change. So I think I'm going to hand over to Siobhan first, maybe that will give us a bit of the background, and then Damien is going to go through his own personal journey to date. So over to you, Siobhan.
Great. Siobhan, it's so unusual to have another Siobhan on Zoom. Can I just say it's so nice to hear my name echoed back, but great name, by the way. So I suppose, I'm delighted to be spending your lunch half hour with you guys and to share the space with Damien. And really, I'm going to keep my stuff really pretty short, because really it's Damien's piece that is the most powerful. So let me just explain a little bit about myself and my role. I am Siobhan Cafferty, and I am the Social Enterprise Project Manager working with Irish Prison and Probation Services. Very long-winded title, but I'll explain that now in a few minutes. So I suppose just before I start, to just say thanks to Siobhan and Jan for inviting us to do this talk now today. So my role, as I said, is around the development of social enterprise as an employment option for people who have criminal records. I came from an operations background. I've always worked in the community and voluntary sector, worked with various different marginalised groups, which is why the connection with Open Doors is so lovely. And my most recent role prior to taking up this job, I was the manager of the Bridge Project, which is a community-based probation-funded project in the Liberties, actually, which is where Michelle works. So it's interesting how it's a small world, really. But the Bridge Project, I suppose, took people from prison, immediately from prison, into the organisation. We worked with adult male violent offenders. So really those that no employer really wanted to employ, you know, and they were kind of on the top of the list and seen as the most risk adverse or risky to take on. However, in getting to know the lads who came into the project, and seeing them on a daily basis and seeing the work that they would have put in terms of the education and upskilling within the prison setting. And then also when they came to us and the commitment that they had to the courses that we offered, and all of which I should say, both in prison and within the community projects, are of industry standard. You know, we're training people to the highest level possible. And I suppose one of the things then is, you know, moving them into employment. And I have to say, despite it being a recession as it was when I was there, we were successful in getting people into full-time work. And that was really just through engagement with employers, talking to them, seeing what their risks or concerns were, and then really working in a collaboration with them to support not only them, but also then the individual to be able to keep going at that job. So that worked for an awful lot of people, thankfully. But we noticed that there was a cohort of people within Bridge that almost like their self-esteem was on the floor. They didn't believe that they could do work. They didn't believe that actually they had the capacity to do it, nor did they believe that people would give them the chance. So there was a bit of a stepping stone, and in having a look at how we could fill that stepping stone, I suppose, I looked at the social enterprise model as a way of being able to do that, as being able to provide a buffer for people, for those who come out of prison, those who are on probation in the community, and mainstream employment. So the idea is, and the Department of Justice thankfully took that up back in 2017, and we developed our first strategy on social enterprise then that year. And basically it's looking at, and we've been developing it, it's looking at social enterprise models as a way of being able to get people who need that bit of a buffer between leaving prison on probation and moving into mainstream employment. It gives them the space to say, yes, I'm able to do this, to increase their self-worth, their self-confidence, and to prove to themselves primarily, to be honest with you, that the skills and talents that they have are something that employers want and are looking for. And then also, I suppose, from the employer side, it breaks the mold for them, and it kind of breaks down the stigma and the fear and the label of taking on someone with a criminal record. And I'm not going to go into that too much because really Damien explains it so perfectly now, and he'll come to that now later. So I suppose the impact of having a criminal record on someone is long-standing and vast. It just continues to go on and on and on. And actually, despite working with a number of marginalised groups in my past work experience, I really believe that one of the most difficult labels to shed is that of ex-offender, ex-prisoner, whatever it might be. And I say this to people all of the time, like, when someone finishes education, or maybe are lucky enough to go into third level education, as you are now, Siobhan and Sharina, the label of student is there, and that student label stays there. When you finish third level education, you're not an ex-student. When someone leaves prison, they are known as an ex-prisoner or an ex-offender. And what I generally tend to ask employers in particular is, at what point can someone lose that label? What do they actually have to do to be able to be seen as someone who did commit crimes? They own up to that. They've paid their price that the judge has said you are sentenced to, whatever the custodial sentence might be, or probation sanction might be. They've done that. And then not only have they done that, in many, many cases, they've gone above and beyond, and they've done everything they can to distance themselves from their criminal past. Yet when they leave that, or they go through that gate of a prison, when they come out, that label is with them. And it's an invisible label, and it has a huge amount of impact on their future and what they actually can do. So unfortunately, what we've got here in Ireland is we've got a really high recidivism rate. Now, it is coming down. Our recidivism rate, and for those of you not familiar with that basically is someone who leaves prison. They measure and monitor what happens to them within a 3-year period. So the recidivism rates, the latest ones that we have are from 2014, and they're hovering around 50%. 50% of people who left prison in 2014 were back inside within 3 years. It's not acceptable. And we all know that within the Department of Justice, Prison and Probation. It has come down, as I said, but in terms of international standards, we have a long way to go. And I'll just throw this figure out there at you as well. The cost to have someone in prison for a year in 2019 was 75 grand, just over 75 grand. It's a lot to have someone in prison. So effectively, we know that employment is a protection factor against people offending in the first place, but also then reoffending. We know, and as I said, we'll hear from Damien in a little while, is the importance of having a job and what that does. And one of the things that I kind of live by, and I say this all of the time to anybody who will listen, if we want things to change, we have to change how we do things. All of us collectively in collaboration, whether that's an individual mission or goal that we have, whether that's the Department of Justice. If we want that recidivism rate to come down, we have to change what we're doing. We have to build on what we're already doing well, but we have to push outside of the scope of just the criminal justice sector. We do not have the answers. As I said, the social enterprise model is something that they looked at, and we have been doing since 2017. And we introduced a new strategy on it called A New Way Forward, and it really was a new way forward. And I think for the Department of Justice, probably one of the most risk-averse departments in any government department in any country, it was really kind of breaking the mold, and it was saying, we know we can change, we know we need to do better, we are doing everything that we can, but let's have a look at social enterprise as a model of being able to complement what we're already doing. So in a nutshell, what does employment in a social enterprise give someone with a criminal record? I mentioned already all of that soft skills stuff, all of that personal awareness, worthiness, understanding, confidence that they can do this. But the key piece is that an individual with a criminal record employed in a social enterprise gets the employer-to-employer work reference. And that is the key, pardon the pun, not related to prison keys. It is the key really to their future. It is the thing that allows them to say, okay, I've proven to this employer that I am worthy, that I have the skills and the talents, and that I'm a really good employee. But now I'm ready to move on. Now I'm ready to up my earning potential. I want to go into the mainstream labour market. Having that employer-to-employer work reference makes all of the difference. So we need employers on board, effectively. We need employers to see beyond a criminal record. We need for employers to see the individual that's sitting in front of them who has applied for a position, that they have obviously shortlisted them for that position based on the skills and experience that they may have, and that they see that individual as a person who has come through a whole range of backstory. but that are they the best person for the position? And while the criminal record is there, it will still be there, that does not detract from the person that they see in front of them today. So I suppose I'll kind of wrap up shortly. As I said, one of the things that we did in 2017 was we had that new strategy. I am absolutely delighted that next week, tomorrow week, November 20th, we are launching an expanded strategy. It's called Working to Change. And I suppose it's exactly what we are aiming to do. We are working to change the system. We are working to change how we operate with other government departments. We're changing how we operate with employers and entrepreneurs, because we cannot do this alone. We need for the end result to be that people do not come back into our system. So we all have a safer community that we can all live in, and that for those people who did make mistakes and who have worked, now I mean incredibly hard, to change their particular circumstances. And those circumstances might be drug and alcohol misuse, mental health issues, homelessness, sexual abuse, a whole litany of things. To be able to overcome those, then a criminal record, then find work is phenomenal. And I think, to be honest with you, my experience of finding and working and assisting people who have a criminal record to get employment, the vast majority of the employers say these are incredibly committed people. These bring something to the organization. And Siobhan, you probably would have known this from your time back in AIB, is the diversity and inclusion. The more diverse a staff team is, the better we all operate, the better we're able to see the changes that need to happen into the future. I would be more than happy to share the link for you guys to attend the online, obviously, strategy launch next week. We are focusing on 3 particular areas: social enterprise, general employment, and entrepreneurship, as options for people who have a criminal record to move away from their past, the negative side of their past, and then to move forward into the future. And as I said, we cannot do it alone. So we would really encourage any involvement whatsoever from you guys, any support that you can give. We need that, because I suppose we all have a bit of a responsibility to play around addressing societal issues. So thank you.
Siobhan, I can send that link out after. If you send it on to me, I can share it with everybody in all of our companies as well.
Brilliant. Siobhan, that'd be amazing. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now, over to the man himself, Damien.
Thanks, Siobhan, and thanks everybody here for asking me to come along today. As Siobhan said, I struggled with criminality many years ago, and the invisible label she referred to remains a decade and more on. One of the real challenges, like, first of all, nobody is here trying to excuse criminal behaviour. You know, criminal behaviour shouldn't happen, but unfortunately, sets of circumstances in people's lives can lead to criminal behaviour. Not getting into that, what I want to get into is, I can get into it again sometime if I ever meet you again, but what I want to get into is the opportunity side of things. When I was in prison, one of the decisions I made straight away on committal was to get an education. And in prison, they do FETAC, they do Open University, there's workshops, there's all sorts of different things you could do, computer workshops as well, like, that you can do to kind of address a lack of education or a lack of skill. And I really put in a lot of work in prison, and I felt really good getting out. I felt like I'd used my time to the best of my ability. And when I got out, I found out quite quickly, because of the environment I came from, nobody really wanted to engage and stuff. So that led to a backward step, and it led to, I suppose, a slip and disappointment and all that kind of thing again. And for a long time after getting out, nobody really engaged, and I couldn't tap into any opportunity. And that's a real challenge, like, and everybody that leaves the criminal system will ultimately face that. Now, a lot of society would say, sure, they're only animals, lock them up and throw away the key. But the reality would be, if you treated them like that, is that ultimately they'll all be getting out sometime, and people will be just letting animals back onto the street. And there is no return on investment in that type of treatment of people with convictions. For the most part, anyways, what happened in my story was, I became happy with who I was and where I came from, and as every day passed, I distanced myself from the behaviour that led me to where I ended up. And I came across a course in business and community development, and that was my continuity then from the prison environment, all the skills I built up, and a pathway to progression, which I badly needed to focus and find my feet. So shortly after that, then I got a job where vetting wasn't a requirement, and that was in a distribution company in Galway. And in that role, I grabbed it up. When I got the job, I grabbed it with both hands. I was able to pay for further education. I was able to put a roof over my head. I was able to put food on the table, pay my bills, whatever. And but I climbed the ranks in that job as well. I became an evening shift supervisor, and then I became night shift manager. And I was able to employ people like me in that role as well, that I knew needed to get a break too. And a lot of them people are still working today. They're still there in that organization. Now, the nights, there was no kind of backward step from the nights. I wanted to go back on days and start a family with my partner. But because I was good at the role on nights, they didn't have a day job for me. So we all agreed, look, I'll move on to a day job. So I did. And I got a job with an auctioneer in Athenry. Again, vetting wasn't a requirement. Now, I must stress the fact that I went for lots of jobs where vetting was a requirement, and I'd get through the aptitude tests, I'd get through the health and fitness tests. I'd be called back then for the final interview, and the last question would always be, have you got any criminal convictions? I'd say, yes, I do, and these are what they are. I'm terribly ashamed of them convictions, but I'm extremely proud of all of the positive stuff that has happened since that time. Do you know what I mean? And we try and work around it, but that's the lasting memory of the interview, is the fact that, geez, this guy was in prison. Look what's on the list, and that stays with them. And it shouldn't be that way. There should be a mechanism where all of the positive stuff is taken into account ahead of a list of convictions you cannot change. So yeah, as things got better, things only started to really improve in my journey when I was able to tap into opportunity. And for the people that can't tap into opportunity, it's a very demotivating and hard thing to do, to not be accepted by your community, not be accepted by employers. When you think of vetting, like, there's many ways in which we're exposed to all of these mistakes that we've made. It's not just employment. If we want to volunteer, we're vetted. If we want to do a sporting and coaching role, we're vetted. If we want to apply for insurance, we're vetted. If we want to apply for a house off the county council, we're vetted. All of these things are really important building blocks to kind of starting again. And like, prison is a correctional environment. That's the term they use in the States. It's correctional. So we're sending people to prison to correct their behavior. And the vast majority of society don't see that as the process. They see it as like a punishment, and they don't really want to kind of engage with people that have been in them places. But like, if we don't, as a society, believe that prison is a corrective process, what are we doing spending that type of money on letting people sit in there and rot and not engage with them? It doesn't make any sense. So my message anyway is, opportunity is a very, very important part of getting somebody back, getting them away from crime, reducing crime. And like, employment was a stability factor in my journey, and a really important, and it is a really important part of the puzzle to kind of reducing criminality. And employers can themselves play a huge part in reducing crime. Like Siobhan, the IPS, and all them, the probations, they can't do it on their own unless employers come on board and they engage like them. And I hope this talk leads to a situation where employers are tuned in and they can hear that they are part of the solution, and that they can play a huge part in making a difference if they link in with the strategies that are being launched next week. So I hope that it made a bit of sense to you all, and thanks for inviting me here today, and thanks for listening. Okay.
Damien, thank you so much. That was so impactful, and I could tell it was really from the heart as well, in terms of you talking about your own personal journey. I think that really resonated with me. Like some of the takeaways for me was definitely that the learning piece, and you building on your skills, I guess, helped and enabled you get on the right path, and focus you on where you wanted to go within your life. And also I loved when you talked about giving other people the opportunity as well when you got that manager job. And that's just brilliant, because that is how we make a societal difference and how we bring change along. And what I might do now is, I know that there's definitely people on the line that will have questions. So if it's okay with both yourself, Siobhan and Damien, I might just ask people if they want to unmute themselves and ask a question, if that's okay.
Okay, I just have a very quick question, and I hope I understand about vetting, and like that, you know, within my own family, we had a situation very, very similar to your own, you know, like that, a bad decision that was made a few years ago, and it follows you for the rest of your life. It's very unfair. I know in other countries there are like after a while, that's it, it's gone with vetting. Are we anywhere near that yet in Ireland? That your record, like after 10 years, 15 years, depending on what it is you do, are we anywhere where that is enough now? You've had that label long enough, it's gone.
Well, we actually, oh, Damien, do you want to go? You go on ahead.
Well, like recently, I volunteer in my spare time, and I volunteer with Community Games Ireland, and went through a recent vetting application, and all the stuff from like 2006, 2004 is on that, like, you know, and I was given my free time and got the role. Like I am the county secretary, and I got the role because the deputy president of the organisation really pushed to get me over the line. He got the people that were dealing with the process to base their decision on all of the stuff that has happened since that time. But that process took 3 months, and if that was an employment situation, there's no employer that'll wait that long. Like, you know, jobs need to be filled quickly, and like that process alone is really off-putting, especially when it reflects the person that you no longer are, anyways. You know, so. But no, I don't think we're anywhere near sorting that one out yet.
I appreciate that.
But
sorry.
What we have in Ireland is we have the Spent Convictions Act. So that's effectively what you're referring to. And at the moment, it's very, very limited. And what I would say is, and knowing Damien's past and all the people that I worked with in Bridge, it wouldn't have applied to them. Effectively, what it means is that one, in its current format, now I should say that there's a huge, just finished actually, a consultation process around how that needs to change. The Department of Justice, again, recognised that that is something that really, like, if we want people to move on, we have to look at ways of being able to allow that and to facilitate that. So they have just finished a major consultation process, I think about 2 weeks ago, around the spent convictions. At this moment in time, if you have one or more criminal convictions, only one can become spent or expunged after a 7-year period. Okay, now that would be a relatively minor conviction. Now, the vast majority of people, you know, will have convictions that are on the little bit more medium risk side. So therefore that the current legislation doesn't apply to them. And as Damien said, often what happens with the Garda vetting process is it's an old way of showing an employer or a voluntary agency what someone's past has been. It shows them all the negative things. And that's very hard to counteract, even if you have won an Olympic gold medal. You know, it's very difficult to counteract that. However, with potential changes to the Spent Convictions Act, we are seeing and moving in a direction where it's becoming a little bit fairer. And I think one of the things that Damien said earlier on is no one wants crime. All of us want a crime-free society. The reality of the situation is that's very, very unlikely. But for those who do want to move on from a past, we have to afford them the opportunity to be able to do that and to become active and contributing members of society.
Yeah, no, I agree, because the situation, I don't mind saying, the situation we're dealing with is it's actually loaves of bread we're taking, and each the person was charged per loaf of bread, which each, so instead of, okay, it shouldn't have happened, it was the wrong thing to do. They were very young at the time, and they were delivering bread, and they were giving a few out to their, it was very, very silly, giving a few out to mom's friends or whatever. Shouldn't have happened, fair enough, but the charge was per loaf of bread. So it wasn't one charge of 5 loaves of bread, it was whatever, 15, but it was 15 separate charges. That's still following that young person.
Yeah.
And that's the one I'm aware of, and you're kind of looking at that going, that person can't travel, you're over, what, that's just the way it is. But it's so unfair. I find those things so unfair, and they're so against you, you know what I mean? And I also think that sometimes criminal behavior, I view it as an illness sometimes, or because it is a reaction to a situation, just the same way an illness can be, and you can recover from it the same way you recover from an illness. You come through it and you're completely different.
Look at that example that you've just given is, honestly, the amount of times that I hear of those situations is absolutely terrible. And this is what makes it really tricky. And to bring it back to the point that I said earlier on, I really believe that the offender of the label of offender, should I say, is one of the most trickiest to leave, because it doesn't differentiate between those who are stealing bread for their family, those who have to go out and do something to get €20 to get a bag of heroin because they're addicted. It doesn't look at the circumstances. It's a label that's automatically put on people. And what I will say is, there's absolutely a need for a prison system. There are people who are a danger to themselves and a danger to the community, and the system has to be there to be able to protect us all and also them. But there are an awful lot of people in the prison system when they shouldn't be there because of that situation where people shouldn't have a criminal record because there were extenuating circumstances. And there are an awful lot of people, as I said, unfortunately, in the prison system who have mental health issues. And the only way of being able to address that is to put them into somewhere like prison. And that's something that we really, really need to work on changing. And likewise, it's unfortunate that we're in a situation now where we have the worst homelessness rates that we've had ever in the history of the state. What we'll start to see, unfortunately, potentially coming to Christmas, is that we'll see more people who are homeless coming into prison because it's a warm place where there's food, lodgings, and that's not okay. So often, I suppose, what I say to employers is, see beyond what the convictions are, because there's generally always a story. It's not to excuse it. It was done. The person has done their time or whatever the court ordered punishment was. But we have to allow people to move on, because, if an employer was to know the backstory, sometimes there would be a little bit more of compassion. And as I said, we just have to, from my point of view, just see beyond and allow people the opportunity to be able to change.
Siobhan, can I ask you just on that point, and sorry, Damien, as well, would you guys talk a lot to different organizations on an ongoing basis to get them involved, like in the hiring process? How often would you do that?
This is my 4th Zoom input today. Okay. We have to, we were, and I'll be honest with you, Siobhan, we weren't great about doing that in the past. There's an organization called IASIO, and they are the ones that support people with convictions into employment, making sure that they're ready, first of all, but then they also work with employers, because employers, rightly so, will have some fears and concerns. But sometimes, in many cases, it's the fear of the unknown. I've never done this before. I've never taken on someone. How do I do it? What's the language? What should I use? What do I call them? And that's often the stuff that is the stumbling block, rather than the actual person then themselves. Yeah. So on our side, on the criminal justice sector department side, we are, with this new strategy, we have a whole range of supports that will be available to employers, both social enterprise employers and mainstream employers, to be able to assist them to be open to the idea. That's all we're asking for. Be open to the idea about having a diversity and inclusive HR policy. Yeah. And we will work with you every single step of the way, because we know that employment works.
I think it's so much more than just having the policy. It's actually bringing it to life, isn't it? And you know, that's what you can see the benefits from D&I, even from a research perspective. They're out there. All organizations are talking about diversity and inclusion at the moment, and their policies and what they're trying to do. This is just a perfect example of how they can get involved.
One of the things, I'm sorry, Damien, I don't mean to hog the screen, but I'm just trying to really sell the new strategy. One of the things that, you know, we have to do, and I think the whole idea of role modeling is something that is crucial right across the board, from individual level right the way up to government department. For the past number of years, as I said, IASIO, myself, a whole range of other people have been working with employers and saying, will you be open to taking on someone who has a criminal record or whatever it might be? And I suppose in writing this new strategy, I went to the department and I said, well, we can hardly say that to employers if you're not willing to take people on yourselves. So thankfully, one of the actions within the strategy is to start to open up public sector employment to people who have a criminal record. Now, we're going to be quite a way off that. However, even having that as a target gives hope to people. That also we're also able to say to employers, this is what the department are doing. Now, this shouldn't be the wrong fit. That's what I suppose. One of the things I would say to employers, Damien was hired in his auctioneer role because he had the skills and the training that met the requirements for that position as part of that job description. So this isn't taking on someone as a tokenistic diversity and inclusion tick box exercise. This is saying, we are a business. We need the right person to come in here. We need the right person who's going to be able to hit the ground running. And is this person the right person? And if the answer is yes, well, then that decision is yours. If they have a criminal record, you obviously consider that. But if they meet all of the requirements for the job, that's what you do. And that's the decision as a HR person that you make. Within the Department of Justice, as I said, we need to support people to get to the level where they've got the entry requirements for those positions. So we as part of this new strategy, we have a scholarship and internship fund to support people to continue their education after prison, like Damien was talking about. And so there's no gaps. You know, people can go all the way to PhD level and have done in prison. But sometimes if they're released, they then can't afford to continue with their degree, master's, whatever it might be. So this scholarship fund will help with that, and in particular to get those jobs within the public sector.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Damien. Yeah.
And just in the current job, when I got this current job with the auctioneers, I was a week here when the boss made his own inquiries about my background, and he was taken aback by what he heard. So he pulled me on it, and he said he discussed the one or two charges that he heard about. So I took the time to fill him in on everything else, and we had the conversation. And he then resigned to the fact that we all have things from our past that we'd like to leave in the past and forget about and move on from. And that was a really important step he took. He said, well, I'm still willing to give it a go. He said, you've been here a week, you know what you're doing. And I'm still here today. We're not just boss and an employee. We're friends outside of that as well. Like, we spend time together at the weekends going off cycling or whatever. And, you know, I'm at the end of the phone for him, and he's at the end of the phone for me. It's not just, there's a level of loyalty there that comes with you know, taking that chance. When somebody takes a chance like that on you, knowing what they know, you know, you develop a lot of respect for that person. And that would be the same for a lot of people that are dying to get a chance. When they get it, they will take it. So that's what I want employers to hear.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Damien. We're actually working with IASIO as well. They are one of our supporting partners now. And they're actually taking part. There is a couple of people that we have that are going to take part in the mentoring program that we're launching. So, you know, that's another great avenue how people can get in and work with different organizations and get to know different sectors as well. Look, I just want to thank both of you. Siobhan, thank you so much. If you want to send me on the details about the strategy afterwards, and if people want to attend, if you're going to have an event, I'll most definitely circulate that to our employers. And Damien, thank you so much. You're a great ambassador. You're a great role model. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to share your story.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.